What's that?
No, I think maybe it might be a little bit long, but we try to go fast.
Yeah, it's probably good.
We can do it fast.
Hi, everybody. Just to welcome again Florian and Jing, and also just to sort of reflect a little bit. You started your studio Solid Objectives in 2008, so it's just 2 years. And if you look at your website, you describe yourselves as kind of like ideas, interested in ideas, which since we are a university, that should more or less work. But I think it's sort of interesting to sort of, as it were, take the measure of an office after just 2 years. Like, it's a very, very short time, given that even the shortest of projects in architecture is generally longer than 2 years. So actually it's sort of impossible to be doing the lecture. And I'm interested in that sort of, the way in which this lecture is sort of premature, and yet on the other hand, of course, you both have very long histories and a lot of experience. And so actually you are yourselves responsible for many completed buildings of the highest quality. But then you started this new venture, which puts you back. So in a way, you have this very interesting situation of having been involved in some of the most beautiful and accomplished buildings in the world, and now you find yourself like rebooting. And even that's official. Like, so for example, in 2010, just passed, you guys did the PS1 Young Architects program with the pole dance and so on. So you're officially Young Architects, right? And just in case nobody understood the point, then you win the AIA New York Young Practices Award. So you're not only a young practice, but you're officially a young practice, but also an award-winning young practice, which means you could get the award because you're like younger than the other young practices, like you're the really young ones. And there's a bit of a risk here because it sort of suggests that maybe young practices have ideas and old practices have reality. Right, and so if you become real, you stop talking about ideas. And I think it's certainly interesting that some of the architects that interest us a lot, who continue to be successful, continue to be ideas people, even though officially they could give up with ideas and start talking about contracts. So my little point here is that it's not so simple, really. If you look at the kind of projects you're doing, they involve exactly the kind of experimental zone so characteristic not only of young architects, but I would say of the youth of the field itself, like pavilions, installations, exhibitions, magazine, teaching, all of these laboratory conditions which incubate the most interesting thoughts and sometimes produce buildings and sometimes don't, but remain in a way the threshold in which the architectural discipline mainly operates. Or to say it another way around, even if you did a great building, if any architect does a great building, if it didn't resonate in that space of magazines, publications, exhibitions, and so on, it actually would have no value. So it's not only the place in which we incubate ideas that can't be built, but even if we do build, they have to come back into that zone. So I think actually the so-called young architects become very interesting because they are the caretakers of a zone of the discourse. And just to show how I think it's not so simple, you guys did the house for Ivan and Jane Chainmail. And that seemed to me a super interesting commission. So this means the so-called super young office does this commission for a person who's not so young, actually, precisely not young, but is a very, very experienced and famous designer, and is the son of one of the great architectural, Chainmail, one of the great designers and thinkers. So somehow the youth thing and the age thing all sort of come together. And I noticed in the interview you did with Chainmail, he says this beautiful thing that his father's a great architect, but he didn't want to be an architect because it takes so long to do things. Right? It takes forever. So he became more like a graphic designer. There you find yourself, and then you're in the office of Sejima with Sam Chainmail. So basically the so-called youth thing, I'm not a believer in it. I mean, actually, you're not young. In almost any other field, you should be retiring. Right, and so I just just saying that, like, so yes, again, young office, but actually it takes architects a long time to learn how to be young, it would seem, and the best architects, once they've mastered the art of being young, they do really well. So I think the way things operate in architecture, it's not like you're young and then you get old. You're actually old. Then you go to architecture school and we teach you how to be young, and then you try to perfect the art of being young. And so I sort of see you guys right at the epicenter of our field. Anyway, it's a big responsibility. But they are also two of the nicest people in the universe and absolutely fabulous teachers. So we're really, really lucky that you're teaching with us. So welcome back.
Maybe it's more midlife crisis than her second youth. Thank you. You were going to start, right, Jing?
Yes.
Yes. Can we turn off some lights, please? Let me see. Oh, we do that, right? Here.
Why don't you do that?
Where do we do this again? Where do we turn off the light again? Is it, or do I? Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mark, for that introduction. I just want to confirm the point that I think we're actually very young, and not just the age thing, but also as the age of the office, because for me, I believe that the office is not just about Florian and I, the owner of the name of the office, but it's also kind of this network of people and the dynamic and the connection that the office has to build together. And indeed, the identity of Solid Objectives Indenburg Soil office was started 2.5 years ago. And the only reason I think we are here tonight owes largely to a moderate group of people who have been working with us and a great supporter of our ideas, and have given us, some people have given us chance to work with this thing called architecture. And I think to build up this group of people, it takes a lifelong commitment. And we are only the second year into that, so we are a very young office. And so the sedimentations accumulated throughout this 2.5 years, which we abstract tonight in the form of lecture, in a way attempt to tell a cohesive story, but we're probably the first one to admit that it's our own story, or our own version, Florian, my own version of the story. So, but nevertheless, we try. The title you see here, To Be Determined, loosely ties together the 6 projects that we're going to present tonight with a theme that's twofold. The first of all, it refers to the social and the natural construction of this world that we live in, which can be said to be it's something to be experienced as something irrational, indeterminate, multi-layered, and constantly in flux, and sometimes even volatile. It is not possible to escape the way in which that the feelings of fantasies and anxieties and prejudice and fears and all this other unstable feelings that woven their way into these times that we're living. And secondly, supposedly that we can free ourselves from this fascination to the stable, the monument, and the explicit. We can start to maybe grasp this elastic environment that we're living, and in a way, we're very doubtful of the fast-tracking modernity that we all learn in the school can offer us a resolution, and we contemplate and wonder if everything is elastic, maybe we should just float in this mist of unstable but determined intentions. So one of the first practical concerns of this new ecology that I referred to is, our own relationship with the surroundings, our surroundings. And I think with modernity, it granted us with the law of nature, which we found a stable structure and a uniformity. However, increasingly in the recent history, we have come to understand that this uniformity derives from the projection of our own desires, which is to a large extent have become richer and more diverse. We're subjects that's responsible for the construction of this grid of structure that has become very unstable, and sometimes we stand on the stilts that are barely touching the ground beneath us. So with this kind of thoughts, we entered the competition for the PS1 and MoMA Young Architects program of 2010. And MoMA is a very modern institution, and with its association comes with the Bauhaus tradition. This is the Oscar Schlemmer's choreography piece called Pole Dance, which we wanted to pay tribute to in our proposal to this competition, but also we attempt to destabilize it in our proposal. So in the courtyard of PS1, we laid out 80 fiberglass poles on an elastic grid that's constructed by bungee cords. And within this environment, we inserted activators such as hammocks and ladders and misters. And then these poles are connected to the ground with only the pin connection, allowing them to be dynamically moving within the system. And with this various activators, as we call it, the wind, the pressure of the water, and the people playing, that the system becomes something that the subject engages with. And with this structure, we hoped that the people would re-engage with the physical world and find playfulness within their interaction.
And yeah, another important thing was really the desire to create an interior, so very much a space that you enter rather than an object. So the sensorial, the spatial, rather than the form-driven architectural project was something that we were trying to experiment with here.
So another component of this project is that within in the small courtyard next to the big main space, as the environment of the immersive and interactive part of the installation, which the 8 poles in this small courtyard are have the accelerometer, which is which is this devices that detects the motions of objects, and they have these accelerometers embedded in them. That also a sound engineer programmed application that would transform the data of the motion that's detected into a tone music or tone sound that will be can be played in the space through speakers. And also some application designers have gathered this data and put them into an iPhone application that each pose can be claimed on your mobile phones, and through clicking through them, you can manipulate the effect of each of these poles, the sound they make, and together.
There's the play button. There's actually a play button here. Interesting.
So the idea is that everyone who can get on this application would be able to claim a pole virtually and change the volume of the pole, and you can also shake it and manipulate the sound of the pole. With this application, we attempted to basically realign the physical and the virtual, and maybe with this combination to see if there's any kind of similarities within these two orders, or maybe they are one of the same thing.
The idea indeed to, and I think in a way PS1 asked us to also react to this big question of sustainability, what everybody, every architectural project now needs to answer to. And so our thinking was also maybe if we can find a way that people get more, there's a stronger sensibility towards the physical, or what has happened with our relation to the physical. Is there a way that we can come up with a device that reconnects us to the physical as everybody has escaped, say, in the virtual space? And so by actually using the playfulness of the virtual and seeing if we could reinstill that into the physical, we wanted to basically bring people's attention back to the physical environment. But by providing a hybrid, so a hybrid of a virtual and a physical, we try to merge these two environments. So this is, for instance, a Flickr page where people could directly with their iPhone upload pictures that they would take in the space. And what we just passed, I think, before was this is, for instance, you can make drawings with these poles as well. So these are sound generated drawings that come from these poles with these accelerometers in them. And so there's drawing contests that would be uploaded onto this website that we had organized here together with 2x4, the graphic designers, and Arab as sound engineers on this.
Yeah, so I think one of the other points that's worth noting is that to our great pleased that this installation has become an open platform to which that many collaborators came to us and proposed to integrate their own project into it. And so Arab with the sound engineers from Arab and the application developers from 2x4 and also the national champion of pole dancers came to us and wanted to do their own projects in there. And I think it was surprising, but a very good result that, precisely it was not a project only of our project, but also a project from with the open platform. And this video I'm going to show you now came also out of voluntary collaborator who came to us and wanted to do a 3D setup. We're showing this with a split screen format. We could 3D glasses.
So the sound is generated by the movement of the actually. So Next project, so apart from trying to enter young architects competitions, we do other competitions. This is actually a young architects competition as well. This was in Athens, Greece, a competition called Up to 35, so we could still join that. For a young developer who was also under 35, who had this ambition, or has this ambition, for an area in downtown Athens, Greece, to, through student housing, basically regenerate this neighborhood. This neighborhood is, it's called Maratones and Keramikos. It's two streets that define this area, and this shows the site of the competition. Actually, the exact site of this entry was here. It was an open competition. About, I think, 250 people entered, and we entered as well. What the neighborhood is indeed a neighborhood in transition. It is a working class neighborhood, very dense on the ground, very sort of typical loud streets, and then yards in the back that are not really necessarily used, and somewhere there's sort of a big disconnect between what is happening in the street and what is happening in the back. And through a simple operation and something that was possible within the local code, we actually shifted the bulk of the mass on the site and created an opportunity to make a new typology, if you would like, especially this being a typology for the young, for college students. It's a time in your life when you're still willing to rethink maybe how to live in the city, how to live with one another, and by this small sort of and simple shift, you also create sort of equality for all the units that happen in there. So it's a very democratic move, which seems quite appropriate for the location of the competition. What it also does is it really opens up the street into the yard. So it sort of opens up the block and brings the public in, and it allows basically this zone to become a buffer between the units and the street itself. It does give you obviously a very narrow and slim section of a building, 4.5 meter of building and 4.5 meter of yard. And so we designed it very, very precise, almost like a Japanese capsule hotel. We did want to give all the students their private unit, not some sort of large collective dorm style living. Everybody had their own unit, but we organized it sort of in zones from super personal and closed gradually to more open and more public. And I think the age for which this typology and building is exactly probably you guys, but it's where you jump from sort of very intimate and concentrated modes to very open and exuberant, and so we try to pack these different modes into a very small and confined section. So here you see almost like a Frankfurter Küchen style efficiency in the room where you study, you cook, and you sleep, and then this view out to this yard. This yard is actually a vertical yard, so you see all these lives sort of happening within this elevation. We varied the section to generate some variety also in the spaces. Ultimately, 16 or well, there was a puzzle to try to get in as many units as possible between 16 and 18. And the shared terraces as a way to move up in the building. Getting to your room means also passing somebody in front of their window, so a way to stimulate social exchange as well. And this the yard that can be occupied by students, and the, in a way, very clean and simple and abstract facade as within this chaotic neighborhood. part of the competition was not only to come up with an answer for one type, but actually look at the neighborhood as a whole and think of this as sort of a viral typology that could start taking over the entire neighborhood. And so we were actually one of the finalists. We didn't win the competition, but we were with the last 5, and we could further develop a scheme, and especially our this sort of strategy of opening up the block and gradually through this intervention, if you would do this on all sites, the whole urban fabric would actually start to change, and rather than having this hard division between street and inner court, you get a much more porous and diffused urban fabric. So this was our argument also for as a strategy to take over this entire block. What was interesting, so that we indeed did not, we weren't selected for the final project, but the next day, indeed, this young developer called us and said, we like the strategy, and this strategy works very well on other lots that we have. So the next day, we started to work on a much larger lot on the other side of the street, right here, and that is something that is in development now. Obviously, also apart from the US, Greece is also suffering somewhat from financial constraints. So at this moment we are, well, I will show you where we are. What was interesting here, so this is the other side of the street. This is literally sort of facing the site where we did the competition. This site is much deeper, actually, and it also allowed us to think of more variety in typology. There was sort of a shift towards young families. The desire for a coffee shop and a cafe. So the idea actually that these different buildings, as he takes over the neighborhood, have different amenities that can be shared between all the units. The complication here was also that we had to include 3 stories of parking. So this became actually a very intricate puzzle with ultimately how many units? Like, Yanis, how many units did we have? Yanis and Ilias from our office are also here. They worked very hard on this project. I think we ended up with around 50 units. This project at this moment is developed up to schematic design, but we actually continue to sort of push it, not just to sort of keep it alive, but also because it is an exploration for us of how you can think about the city. So this is an exhibition we had in Beijing at Studio X, there where we actually assumed that we had taken over the entire neighborhood with this typology, and sort of see how it how it would develop. Third project, which keeps us in Asia, is something we're working on right now in Seoul. This is downtown Seoul, or basically the north. It used to be the old town. It's a view from a mountain towards the castle, the main castle. I don't know, I'm sure there's people here from Seoul, and they probably recognize it. This is, I think, it's called Samjukdon, the place. Maybe somebody can correct me in the room if they know it better, but it's basically the old downtown area where there's a lot of old courtyard homes. And the sort of the idea behind this project is driven by 2 things. One is sort of very local and specific, and the other came, and this is maybe more our sort of internal idea and research or sort of discussion that we have within the office. But as Mark said, we are here to speak about ideas as well, not just about solutions. At some point, a student presented her work, and she said, well, you know, this can be sort of kind of, well, whatever. And we initially thought it was quite a lame sort of description of her project, but then realized that maybe everything these days can be sort of kind of whatever, because in the past maybe we made buildings to do something, but at this moment we're doing a lot of these stuff online or in the virtual realm. So almost everything we make can maybe be sort of kind of whatever. And so we started to think, what does that look like if you actually have to design that? And so we got interested in thinking about sort of a deliberate ambivalence, and this idea of something that is ambivalence or something you can't grasp actually becomes maybe more desirable rather than something that is very explicit and very easy to understand. So somewhere the mystique of something that you can't grasp, something that has this undefined or undetermined quality, is maybe something that we can desire. This is not something we shared with our client. Our client is Ms. Lee. She has a gallery, a large gallery, Kupche gallery in this neighborhood, and you see on the left side sort of the original courtyard-style homes, and in the back you see the evil gallery sort of moving into this neighborhood. Ms. Lee has been quite successful in doing that. This are her first two buildings, Kupche Gallery 1, which she started about, I think, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and her second building, Kupche 2. So those two were built, and when they came to us, they had sort of infiltrated in this neighborhood. You see here these old sort of holdouts of other homes. But this neighborhood is becoming very popular. It's a very nice, walkable area where people come in weekends, young couples, to eat their puffy cream and other drink fancy coffees. We were asked to look at the third building over, which is here. The first two exist, and at this moment, actually, our work on this is expanding to redesign the first building and the second building. We're making adjustments there, but initially we were asked to only think about this third building, and we're working also on this fourth building now. So this is sort of it maybe in a way relates to Greece in the sense that it becomes sort of a porous, semi-public piece of city. Well, let's talk about this third building. So the idea of this hard, simple white box moving into this dense and fluid and historic fabric, it's one of the multiple galleries, and so Seoul is getting a little bit nervous about these larger boxes moving in, but still the requirements, especially this one, they wanted a large project space, 15 meters by 10 meters, 7 meters high, one big space in which they can have large installations. So we provided them with the box, and we in a very straightforward diagrammatic way pushed out the circulation and the entrances. So you keep the pure, minimalist white box, and very simple entrance, elevator, corridor downstairs, and stair up are pushed out. It's a large basement. There is a lecture hall downstairs where they will have presentations for their collectors, and a second basement with storage and parking. So that's pretty much the scope. Here the simple white art space with skylights all around. Daylight is important. And then we had to think, how do we bring this white box into this urban fabric? And so this idea of deliberate ambiguity, and the idea of making something that is that maybe because of the fact that it is not hard edge, but actually a sort of a softer and a diffuser object, maybe that could be sort of a negotiator between this historic fabric and the hard edge. This is a painting actually of the site, old Korean painting. It's true. This is the site. There is actually a river that is where the building is now, and we're actually feeding it while building our foundations. There's a lot of water in the ground. This is so within traditional Korean painting, there is also this idea of a layeredness, a diffuseness, a fogginess, and actually then we found one contemporary photographer that they represented also as the same sort of a cloud-like quality to their work. And we thought, what if we take this diagram and we actually sort of shrink wrap it in a layer of diffusion in a way, and it sounded all great. And we made model, and we indeed literally shrink wrapped this diagram into this reflective sort of armor, and we presented it, and Ms. Lee said, "That's great, make it." We first had to get some approval from the historic committee, so we this is the file we had. Especially this diagram, I think, is quite strong in showing how well it fits within the neighborhood. And so we got an approval. Then the question is, of course, great, but what is it? And we had to think, especially because this is a double curvature, it's complex, but at the same time it needs to be exterior, so it needs to be strong. So what is strong, which, what is durable outside and can take on a double curvature? The chainmail mesh is it's a very simple thing used for people that love the past. It's also used, or love the past. It's also used for belly dancing attire and for butcher gloves. And it's only made actually on the scale of the body, so quite small scale. I think the biggest, this is machine made, the biggest diameter is 13 millimeters, so it's a little bit more than a centimeter is what you can buy from say a manufacturer. This was too small, obviously, for the building, so we started to test first by just laser cutting different dimensions in our office to see what is the right size, and at the same time we started to see that this material actually has, so what gives it these elastic qualities. We started to play with how it works geometrically. We got a sample and we started to see how sort of it behaves, and there's sort of a directionality, and we found out that there is a way in which indeed this thing stretches, which allows for it to take on this double curvature. So we mapped the entire perimeter of the building and saw where sort of its maximum expansion and its tightness. Obviously the roof would be 100%, and then you can sort of stretch it along the rest of the surface area of the building. And by then we realized, okay, if we're really going to do this, we have to get an engineer on board, and we actually really have to figure this out, because we have to, obviously this thing doesn't exist, and how do you come up with, well, it needed to get approvals and survive earthquakes, etc. So we teamed up with front facade engineers. We asked them if they wanted to help us with this, and they said, yes, we're going to do we're going to work together on it. We're going to do a digital trajectory and just a physical trajectory. And so we started to do some really super simple empirical testing by just seeing how do forces behave, because there's actually very little knowledge about this material available. And we started to see sort of initial patterns of stress and how they behave. This model became more complex to a level where we almost have every ring modeled. And we built a large model in our office. This is 1 to 10 scale model with the rings to actually see how it would behave in its physical proportion. So it's really both, I think, that are important, both the physical and the digital that need to work together, and it starts to, well, in a way, prove that these things can work to an extent. By then we knew quite a bit about this material, and we actually also had to think of how to install it, and then we, together with Front, decided why don't we just actually just fabricate the thing ourselves and deliver it, and probably, we're going to be installing it as well, because, there's these are all things, aspects you need to think through. So where do you go and get this? You go to Alibaba.com. People who are not familiar with Alibaba.com, it's sort of the match.com between people that make things and people that need things. And so once we put in an inquiry at Alibaba.com with ring mesh, we got a ton of factories in China, actually through Skype, pretty much approaching us. One Skype name was appropriately called Ring, and so we started to chat with one of these people, and we started to work with them, and they actually provided us a large mock-up, or a large sample. This is, I think, 8 feet by 6 feet or something. And it was a very promising Skype relationship we started to develop, and at some point, same as the people you meet at Match.com, you have to see each other in real life. And so we decided to go to China, this was about, well, a little bit over half a year ago, to Anping, and Anping is 6 hours west of Beijing, in a town where after quite a sort of intense car ride, we ended up in this town, and it was a pretty rough town. You can buy dogs, and we ended up in this very small courtyard, I would say as big as the stage here, and there was our sample. And we looked around. This woman had just eaten her food, and this is a little room off of this courtyard. And all the way in the back, there's one machine where even behind that machine was one boy, and this boy was there hand welding these rings together. So we had guaranteed to our client that we would be able to deliver this mesh, and this was the moment sort of realization of what we had discussed. The man here on the left also realized that when we told him that there were actually 400,000 rings, that it would probably take him more than 10 years to put the facade together. This is Mike.
Say that we have a lot of cousins in town.
Yeah. Actually, Jing, who is from China, also acknowledged that she had never been so deep into China. So this was a very sort of deep China for the Chinese. Mike Ra from Front there also thinking, gee, what did I promise? What we did is we took this sample and we actually went to another company because smartly Jing had seen that most of the Skype reactions actually all came from this town, Anping. And a more aggressive company, they took the sample and they said, we can do this. And within 24 hours, we found a number of companies that could do it. So Mike was happy again. And well, now at this moment, we just commissioned one of these companies. The other one, the one with the tiger, is actually making the mesh now. So we could happily start digging. And this was just 2 weeks ago. They finished all the pouring of the concrete, the foundation, and the project should be done in November. This project, and then we're going to continue to work on these other projects on that site. Yeah, you're going to do next project.
Yeah. So this next project is also, it's also in Asia. It's a 400 square meter exhibition space that's erected in the mid-center of Beijing. This is a newly kind of built center that's mimicking the Rockefeller Center development. And so in this place, a culture festival is called Get Louder, that's led by the culture kind of curator Oling and the architecture curator Eric Shan. And they approached us 2 months before the opening of the festival and asked us maybe we can do an exhibition and pavilion space for all the screening and lecturing programs to take place during the festival. And we said, because we never say no, we said yes this time too. So 2 days later, we got a project schedule which indicated that we need to deliver the construction documents in the following week. But we remained optimistic and proposed something very quick to them along the similar thoughts that we had of this unstable structure that we experimented in PS1 at that moment. So our proposal was this vertical structures that's connected only on one end rigidly and on the other kind of gathered with a tension ring, and this ring would be held down by adjustable weights, and by manipulating the weights you would get a different curvature of that vertical member, therefore the shifting, the transforming form of the pavilion, the structure itself. And to keep the ring and sun out, we would just simply put a tarp on the upper portion of the pavilion, and this tarp can just be changed from one location to the other, because this festival was supposed to take place in Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou. So they liked that idea very much, but they said in Beijing we have very strong wind, so we need to, the unstable structure is not going to work, but we will approximate your engineering solution with our engineer, and this is our approximation, and this is the detail. Thank you very much. And before we know it, it was erected. So we, and the next question they had was, okay, about this skirt, we like it very much, but we need also, for the same wind reason, we need a little bit more substantial skirt. So this time we learned our lesson, and immediately we proposed solution that would be, within 2 days we proposed a solution that would just hang this stainless steel panels to the horizontal members that spans on this vertical members, and they would be connected only loosely at the top. So when the wind comes, the supposedly very strong wind of Beijing comes, it would create this ripple effect on the skin of the window, of the building. So they said, oh, that sounds like a great idea. The only thing is that the stainless steel is too expensive. If we change them to plastic and make them thicker, they should be achieve the exactly same effect. And we found this colors that's available on the market. We think these 3 colors matches your stainless steel specifications, but please confirm. So we pondered for a few hours and concluded that if the kind of subtlety that we intended to achieve with the stainless steel panels cannot be achieved, then maybe we should go for alienness. So we said, let's go with shocking pink, because the shocking pink has luckily quite a few variations with that family. And because we thought subtlety and alienness are sort of the 2 ends of the same scale of the 2 ends of the sliding scale of differentiations. So with this, 3 shocking pink variations, we sort of got both. So by this time, when our underground local staff told us that our custom detail for the hinge was replaced by tie wrap, we were not so surprised, and we were not so disappointed either. I think we were actually quite pleased that by this point that this tag of war relationship with the clients and the contractors there, and also the kind of the situation that no one can do anything about, is fascinating to us. It's a new relationship that's kind of constantly shifting and transforming, and maybe in this situation everyone is a winner and no one is.
I think we asked for a mock-up, but they sent us an invitation to the opening, and they said, why need a mock-up? Because we already built the thing.
So with this invitation, I flew to Beijing, and looking at this shocking pink building in front of me, and I was wondering if we are the author of this design. However, and just go back to my point earlier, that I think it's precisely from this kind of hybridized kind of a dynamic that these bastard typologies and mutant materials are formed. And there's something interesting in that the architects will not be the person that holds the iron stamp, but rather we are the people who can negotiate between different peoples and different ideas and different places. And maybe we can be the interface between softer links.
So
in this new energy. And there's a short video of the effect of the skin of what we preserved. After the 2 months adventure. They also calculated the panels a little bit too in the middle, so the top of the pavilion is not covered.
looks like my I never saw the thing actually because it went so fast that I didn't have a chance to go there. But it was so the video is the same. It's the most information.
When it was published in the magazine, there was a writer who said it's rare to see a pink shiny building so contextual. So I think without story, maybe I can clarify why it was very contextual.
We're going to show now 2 more projects. One is a competition entry we just did, and we're showing this, I think, more because of the way we did the project. So sort of from a process standpoint, we worked together with Arab acoustical engineers with whom we had developed a relationship through PS1, and so this is a competition in Poland. In Warsaw for a symphony hall, 1,500 people symphony hall. And what is interesting in sort of the competition brief is that the architectural brief is like 3 pages and the acoustical brief is pretty much 50 pages. And so the jury was also mostly acousticians, and it gave us, well, what was very interesting is that first of all, it means that as a young and small office, it actually allows you to participate in these things because the sort of the weight within such a project can be shared. The sort of the load, the workload, and also the ideas load that needs to be put into it. And it's also really interesting to see how indeed maybe the architectural practice is changing in a much more collaborative spirit. And so that's one reason to show it. At the same time, I think what is interesting is the way we're trying to develop a design method that keeps options open towards the end. Let me first just explain a little bit about the project itself. This is the token Google Earth picture for when you can't go on a site visit. But this is in the east of Poland. In Warsaw. The less developed part, the historical part, is on the west side, and right here you see a park and this old veterinary institute, which was to be the site for this competition. The veterinary institute had been there for a very long time, and so it was sort of an enclave within the city, beautiful but inaccessible. The idea was to move the symphony hall within this enclave and also bring in rehearsal halls and educational parts within a number of old buildings that were on the site. Beautiful sort of lush area within the city, and to add this large concert hall. And these buildings, they have they certainly had a certain capacity, but the 1,500 seat concert hall is quite a large hall to land within this site. The historic buildings were also already used for some local music school. And so I will briefly explain the way we came up with the form, which had to do in a way with how do you deal with, on the one hand, this very rigid axis of the existing buildings and this classical central symmetrical axis. At the same time, the ambition to come up with a form that opens up the site to a larger audience and actually reaches out to an audience beyond the site itself. So we kept the access, we kept the project on access, but actually through its form we tried to generate a space that exists beyond the site. We were able to get all the auxiliary program and facilities into the old buildings and could make the concert hall itself as sort of an individual room in the back of the site, which you see over here. The form, in a way, opens up towards the city, allows daylight into the space, also into the concert hall itself, which is actually a quite exciting thing, and it also, in a way, tries to respect the space of the old buildings around it. So here you see, and it was in a way a struggle to see how big such space or such hall needs to be. So this is the overall organization. What I and its relation to the park and sort of the way we opened it up by making the entire perimeter permeable, and then the hall itself is actually quite straightforward in the sense that you have the concert hall, which needs to be an enclosed, acoustically sealed space, and then you have the lobbies, the foyers that can happen between this interior skin and this exterior skin, and then there's a large rehearsal orchestra rehearsal hall underneath, which can be visible from the lobby, and then there's a second lobby where people with tickets go, and then they sort of move up through staircases in between this shell, actually between the inner wall of the hall and the outer wall of the form. Here you see the lobby and sort of the underbelly of the hall as you move up. And then for the hall itself, it was very interesting. Well, there's basically two typologies of concert halls. One is the shoebox, which is sort of a deep, classic Amsterdam Concertgebouw, or the Vienna Music Hall. And then there is the, since obviously Sharum, the much more dramatic and currently desirable vineyard setting. Also, the Disney Hall by Gary uses this. And actually, as there's sort of a shift from listening to seeing, people like more dramatic halls where the sound is actually less great than the straight box where the acoustics are good, but maybe you can't show your new mink coat. So there was sort of a drive for this vineyard type setting, and and it means that there's a new sort of architectural project within the design of that of the way people are organized within that space. And so the vineyard is a very dramatic, visually rich type, and so we went in search for an image that we could use in a way to work towards, or basically as a source of inspiration. This is a Escher drawing, obviously the mathematician who made complicated geometric drawings, and this became sort of a thing to chase within this design. And what was nice is that, so here really the dialogue between Arab and us was it was a very collaborative and actually back and forth type of method. So we had to come up with a way of working in which we could refine the acoustics at the same time, get this architectural idea in there. And the idea of this, say, Escherian construct was also the idea of making sort of a scaffold, like a network that would sit loose as an individual structure within this acoustical shell. So you have an acoustic shell, and then within it is sort of this really open, lace-like, more like mesh-like sort of independent structure where people would sit, and it would allow for daylight even to come in behind the seats and people to circulate behind the seats. So we developed this concept which is the variable volume, where the acoustics of the hall can actually dramatically change depending on the volume that is made available. So this inner seating structure could be closed off, and such that the volume of the hall could be closed, which gives you a different reverberation time, and then the entire space can open up. for larger orchestras. And so, and the other part was sort of the acoustical pod, where the sides of the walls behind the seating would reflect the sound back. So these were given by Arab, and we worked with them very, very. Here we didn't copy the movie to this thing. This is also a movie which shows basically a parametric model that we came up with, which allowed us to continuously refine the shape of the room and change it while sticking to the parameters that were given by Arab. And so actually we only had to fix the room in sort of the last minute, but at the same time could guarantee its acoustical performance. This is a physical model of that lattice structure that would be inserted in the acoustical shell, and here some imagery of how that would look, and a view at night. This one we also didn't win, and we will continue to do more competitions until we win one. And now Jing is going to show our first project.
Yeah, this is our first project. Also, it's the last project of tonight. This is the project that Mark referred to in the introduction. In many ways, it was the first. It was the perfect first project because it made us to think some of the most fundamental issues within the architecture discipline. It is single family. Or more like for the older couple, holiday house sited on the along the Hudson Valley in the New York State. In Garrison, and so the project is it's a weekend house, and it's for this modernist graphic designer Ivan Chemaya, who's also portrayed, who's in this picture, and that's him. And these are some of the projects that he's done in his life. So he was if you are not familiar with him, basically he cleaned up all the mess of the pre-modern, pre-corporate logos and fonts in America, and continued to work in this modernist tradition to this day. And for us to work with him, it was an interesting dialogue between him and us as different generations, and we proposed to challenge this conventional man looking over nature trope as often done in a modernist fashion, and we kind of by dissolving and distributing the mass of the buildings into a loose gathering of the solid and the voids into the site, we create a house that's equally open in all directions and welcomes nature in. The common programs, the living room, dining room, library, bedrooms, and bathrooms are kind of they all each have their individual volumes, and they're all connected and separated from each other by this unenclosed courtyard in the middle. There are two of them. One is here and one is over here. And so this kind of configuration allows passive cooling to go through the building, which and also we had the trees. We try to not cut the magnificent trees around the site, and also have two in the courtyard, and use that as shading to eliminate the active cooling systems. We will be playing the film that Mark referred to earlier, which will talk about the design in great detail, so I'm not going to explain it too much. But just to walk you through the space, this is the library, which is one of the solid volume, and this is the living room that's adjacent to the library. That's in the glass volume, sort of the void that I mentioned earlier. And this is the living room looking at from the other side. This is the bathroom. That's also a void, which is a glass volume. So this can only be done if you have a lot of forest around you. And so this is this is the kind of the collection of solid and void, and inviting the nature in. So unfortunately, this project did not was cancelled right after the CD was completed.
After we got a building permit.
Yeah, even after we got the building permit, but fortunately we were able to capture some parts of the story with this short interview we produced with Ivan. Which is part of our show at the Forum 2 years ago.
I miss the tower, don't you?
I do.
The greater exaggeration of the heights, I think, was kind of important thing. I think essentially the brief is the flexibility of having guests and family from time to time, but basically it's the two of us, where I can make a mess and where Jane can make a mess, because I like to do my own artwork and make collages, and even my studio doesn't require a lot of space because I don't do large paintings, so I'm not chipping away at big stones with hammers. And but it's, again, part of the plan of the house is to have what could be called studio and workplace for Jane, separated from mine, so that we're not interfering with each other every minute. And where we found this site, I would say it looked out, if one could see through the trees in all directions, probably more than 300 degrees out of 360. It was geologically very dramatic in the sense that its rocks, hills came up in very quick succession. So it's very three-dimensional territory. This is a house, I think, that what I could say that grew out of the client and the site and the problem. Because there are two spaces which are completely open to the sky, so that means another kind of light. And but if you're in one or the other, you're looking through the real space, real in the sense of dirt and sky, to the other space, so that there's a sense of enlargement of what you do have because of this mixture of indoor, outdoor, open, closed.
Yeah.
Mix.
Exactly.
And that's very important. And most houses don't work like that.
No.
You know, most houses, you go from one room to another, and all you can do is see back through the doorway to what you just left, but not a sense of space, usually. We're talking about moving a rock that the only way you could get it there would be before the house and the walls go up, otherwise it would weigh too much. I mean, it's 5 tons of boulder, 10,000 pound boulder, I mean, as big as this table and that high, you know, that's a real stone. It's a matter of bringing the inside outside even more. I noticed, though, that you don't have it in the rendering. But it's I think you should have put it in the model, too, because I think it's kind of important.
We have it in the large model. It is.
You've got a rock in there?
Yes.
Because I think it makes a difference. Having been brought up in a very modern contemporary world in every way, with not only a father, a brother, a son who are architects. The only reason I'm not an architect is because I don't have the patience to wait for things to happen. I'm a graphic design. I do 100 times more jobs and 95% of mine are done. My father was born in the Caucasus and was the land that his family had was breeding and raising horses, and they had thousands of acres. It was an incredible long thing. But when they discovered oil on their lands, which didn't really affect what they did that much, but it made them rich as Croesus. But in 1917, he went from being a rich young man to penniless. Bolsheviks took away everything. He didn't have anything more than the clothes on his back, more or less. Nothing. He was on his own from 17 years of age on. That was that. So he was, as he always said, he was saved by having everything taken away, because otherwise he would be in pantaloons, and snotty pain in the ass. but so he became an architect, yes, an educator in great universities, Harvard, Yale, MIT, Institute of Design. He was a very important teacher to an awful lot of architects. He never studied architecture in his life. Never went to architectural school, not for 10 minutes. He decided to be an architect, period, and did it. The idea of the problems of architecture was something that I always had a sort of instinctive fear about, because so many things start and don't get done, sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for bad reasons. I'm not as well off as I would hope to be after working hard for 50, 60 years. Because otherwise I'd be glad to build it and make it bigger.
Make a few more boxes.
But I realized that not only that, but at my age, my income is going to go down even if I survive. That's guaranteed. It's not guaranteed that I'll survive at all, but it's guaranteed that if I do, that I won't be richer. Guaranteed, not possible. Yeah. Well, this is a nice site, but which I still own.
Yeah.
Someday you build a house, maybe they'll build this house.
I think this is too personal.
Yeah.
It's also, as you said, the architecture is very different from graphic design. You have to, it doesn't always happen.
Yeah, but it's too bad. Because I think, if I just could afford it, it could have been expanded, and I would love to have it for, not just for, because it's, but for yourself, it's Sam needs it would have to be helpful to him.
We didn't want to leave you on such a sad note, but this is the end of our lecture. So thank you. Questions? So the guild still.
It's very contemplative at this moment.
Somebody have tissues? Yeah.
Search Chainmail's archives while you were doing research for that project?
No, we did not. No, we did not. No, we spoke a lot with Ivan himself, of course. We cut out one part of the video, which you can find on our site or elsewhere. I mean, basically we reduced it further and further down, but at some point he speaks about his relationship to Breuer and the impact Breuer homes had on him. He says that he used to pick Breuer's apples. So there was a more a sort of a Breuer reference there than looking at his father. Yeah.
So just to point out the obvious that when the building in Korea is finished, this magnificent moment of youthful curiosity and experimentation will be over. This is the last lecture. This is the last lecture of the golden 2 years, right? And now you become successful and and constructive. So it's really like the end of the innocence.
I hope not.